"Goodbye, my life," said the King of Ireland's son. "I might as well try to catch an eagle on the wing as to run down a deer that has gone out of sight already." He sat down on the ground, and his despair was great. Then his name was called, and he saw Fidelma coming toward him. She looked at him as though she were in dread, and asked, "What task has my father set you?" He told her, and then she smiled. "I was in dread it would be a more terrible task," she said. "This one is easy. I can help you to catch Whitefoot the fawn, but first eat what I have brought you." She put down bread and meat and wine, and they sat down, and he ate and drank. "I thought he might set you this task," she said, "and so I brought you something from my father's store of enchanted things. Here are the shoes of swiftness. With these on your feet you can run down Whitefoot the fawn, but you must catch her before she has gone very far away. Remember that she must be brought in when the goats are going back into their shelter at sunset. You will have to walk back, for all the time you must keep hold of her silver horns. Hasten now, run her down with the shoes of swiftness, and then lay hold of her horns. Above all things, Whitefoot dreads the loss of her silver horns." He thanked Fidelma. He put on the shoes of swiftness and went into the wood. Now he could go as the eagle flies. He found Whitefoot the fawn drinking at the raven's pool. When she saw him, she went from thicket to thicket. The shoes of swiftness were hardly any use to him in these shut-in places. At last he beat her from the last thicket. It was the hour of noontide then. There was a clear plain before them, and with the shoes of swiftness he ran her down. There were tears in the fawn's eyes, and he knew she was troubled with the dread of losing her silver horns. He kept his hands on the horns, and they went back over miles of plain and pasture, bog and wood. The hours were going quicker than they were going. When he came within the domain of the enchanter of the Black Backlands, he saw the goats going quickly before him. They were hurrying from their pastures to the goat shelter, one stopping, maybe, to bite the top of a hedge, and another giving this one a blow with her horns to hurry her on. "By your silver horns, we must go faster," said the King of Ireland's son to the fawn. They went more quickly then. He saw the enchanter of the Black Backlands waiting at the goat house, now counting the goats that came along, and now looking at the sun. When he saw the King of Ireland's son coming with his capture, he was so angry that he struck an old full-bearded goat that had stopped to rub itself. The goat reared up and struck him with its horns. "Well," said the enchanter of the Black Backlands, "you have performed your first task, I see. You are a greater enchanter than I thought you were. Whitefoot the fawn can go in with my goats. Go back now to your own sleeping place. Tomorrow I'll come to you early and give you your second task." The King of Ireland's son went back and into the dry water tank. He was tired with his day's journey after Whitefoot the fawn. It was his hope that Fidelma would come to him and give him shelter for that night. Until the white moon rose over the trees, until the hounds went out hunting for themselves, until the foxes came down and hid in the hedges, waiting for the cocks and hens to stir out at the first light. So long did the King of Ireland's son stay huddled in the dry water tank. By that time he was stiff and sore and hungry. He saw a great white owl flying toward the tank. The owl perched on the edge and stared at the king's son. "Have you a message for me?" he asked. The owl shrugged with its wings 3 times. He thought that meant a message. He got out of the tank and prepared to follow the owl. It flew slowly and near the ground, so he was able to follow it along a path through the wood. The king's son thought the owl was bringing him to a place where Fidelma was, and that he would get food there and shelter for the rest of the night. And sure enough, the owl flew to a little house in the wood. The king's son looked through the window, and he saw a room lighted with candles, and a table with plates and dishes and cups, with bread and meat and wine. And he saw at the fire a young woman spinning at a spinning wheel, and her back was toward him, and her hair was the same as Fidelma's. Then he lifted the latch of the door and went very joyfully into the little house. But when the young woman at the spinning wheel turned round, he saw that she was not Fidelma at all. She had a little mouth, a long and a hooked nose, and her eyes looked crossways at a person. The thread she was spinning she bit with her long teeth, and she said, "You are welcome here, Prince." "And who are you?" said the King of Ireland's son. "Eva is my name," said she. "I am the eldest and wisest daughter of the enchanter of the Black Backlands. "My father is preparing a task for you," she said, "and it will be a terrible task, and there will be no one to help you with it, so you will lose your head surely. And what I would advise you to do is to escape out of this country at once." "And how can I escape?" said the King of Ireland's son. "There's only one way to escape," said she, "and that is for you to take this light red steed that my father has secured under 9 locks. That steed is the only creature that can bring you to your own country. I will show you how to get it, and then I will ride to your home with you." "And why should you do that?" said the King of Ireland's son. "Because I would marry you," said Eva. "But," he said, "if I live at all, Fidelma is the one I will marry." No sooner did he say the words than Eva screamed out, "Seize him, my cat o' the mountain! Seize him and hold him!" Then the cat o' the mountain that was under the table sprang across the room and fixed himself on his shoulder. He ran out of the house. All the time he was running, the cat o' the mountain was trying to tear his eyes out. He made his way through woods and thickets, and mighty glad he was when he saw the tank at the gable end of the house. The cat o' the mountain dropped from his back then. He got into the tank and waited and waited. No message came from Fidelma. He was a long time there, stiff and sore and hungry, before the sun rose and the enchanter of the Black Backlands came out of the house. "I hope you had a good night's rest," said the enchanter of the Black Backlands, when he came to where the King of Ireland's son was crouched, just at the rising of the sun. "I had indeed," said the king's son. "And I suppose you feel fit for another task," said the enchanter of the Black Backlands. "More fit than ever in my life before," said the King of Ireland's son. The enchanter of the Black Backlands took him past the goat house and to where there was an open shelter for his beehives. "I want this shelter thatched," said he, "and I want to have it thatched with the feathers of birds. Go," said he, "and get enough feathers from wild birds, and come back and thatch the beehive shelter for me, and let it be done before the set of the sun." He gave the king's son arrows and a bow, and a bag to put the feathers in, and advised him to search the moor for birds. Then he went back to the house. The King of Ireland's son ran to the moor and watched for birds to fly across. At last one came. He shot at it with an arrow, but did not bring it down. He hunted the moor all over, but found no other bird. He hoped that he would see Fidelma before his head was taken off. Then he heard his name called, and he saw Fidelma coming toward him. She looked at him as before with dread in her eyes, and asked him what task her father had set him. "A terrible task," said he, and he told her what it was. Fidelma laughed. "I was in dread he would give you another task," she said. "I can help you with this one. Sit down now and eat and drink from what I have brought you." He sat down and ate and drank, and he felt hopeful, seeing Fidelma beside him. When he had eaten, Fidelma said, "My blue falcon will gather the birds and pull the feathers off for you. Still, unless you gather them quickly, there is danger, for the roof must be thatched with feathers at the set of the sun." She whistled, and her blue falcon came. He followed it across the moor. The blue falcon flew up in the air and gave a bird call. Birds gathered, and she swooped amongst them, pulling feathers off their backs and out of their wings. Soon there was a heap of feathers on the ground, pigeons' feathers and pies' feathers, cranes and crows, blackbirds and starlings. The King of Ireland's son quickly gathered them into his bag. The falcon flew to another place and gave her bird call again. The birds gathered, and she went amongst them, plucking their feathers. The king's son gathered them, and the blue falcon flew to another place. Over and over again the blue falcon called to the birds and plucked out their feathers, and over again the king's son gathered them into his bag. When he thought he had feathers enough to thatch the roof, he ran back to the shelter. He began the thatching, binding the feathers down with little willow rods. He had just finished when the sun went down. The old enchanter came up, and when he saw what the king's son he was greatly surprised. "You surely learned from the wizard you were apprenticed to," said he. "But tomorrow I will try you with another task. Go now and sleep in the place where you were last night." The king's son, glad that the head was still in his shoulders, went and lay down in the water tank. Until the white moon went out in the sky, until the secret people began to whisper in the woods. So long did the King of Ireland's son remain in the dry water tank that night. And then, when it was neither dark nor light, he saw a crane flying toward him. It lighted on the edge of the tank. "Have you a message for me?" said the King of Ireland's son. The crane tapped 3 times with its beak. Then the king's son got out of the tank and prepared to follow the bird messenger. This is the way the crane went. It would fly a little way and then light on the ground until the prince came up to it. Then it would fly again. Over marshes and across little streams the crane led him, and all the time the King of Ireland's son thought he was being brought to the place where Fidelma was, to the place where he would get food, and where he could rest until just before the sun rose. They went on until they came to an old tower. The crane lighted upon it. The king's son saw there was an iron door in the tower, and he pulled the chain until it opened. Then he saw a little room lighted with candles, and he saw a young woman looking at herself in the glass. Her back was toward him, and her hair was the same as Fidelma's. But when the young woman turned round, he saw she was not Fidelma. She was little, and she had a face that was brown and tight like a nut. She made herself very friendly to the King of Ireland's son, and went to him and took his hands and smiled into his face. "You are welcome here," she said. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Gilveen," said she, "the second and the most loving of the 3 daughters of the enchanter of the Black Backlands." She stroked his face and his hands when she spoke to him. "And why did you send for me?" "Because I know what great trouble you are in. My father is preparing a task for you, and it will be a terrible one. You will never be able to carry it out." "And what should you advise me to do, King's daughter?" "Let me help you. In this tower," said she, "there are the wisest books in the world. We'll surely find in one of them a way for you to get from this country. And then I'll go back with you to your own land." "Why would you do that?" asked the King of Ireland's son. "Because I wish to be your wife," Gilveen said. "But," he said, "if I live at all, Fidelma is the one I shall marry." When he said that, Gilveen drew her lips together and her chin became like a horn. Then she whistled through her teeth, and instantly everything in the room began to attack the king's son. The looking-glass on the wall flung itself at him and hit him on the back of the head. The leg of the table gave him a terrible blow at the back of the knees. He saw the 2 candles hopping across the floor to burn his legs. He ran out of the room, and when he got to the door it swung round and gave him a blow that flung him away from the tower. The crane that was waiting on the tower flew down, its neck and beak outstretched, and gave him another blow on the back. So the King of Ireland's son went back over the marshes and across the little streams, and he was glad when he saw the gable end of the house again. He went into the tank. He knew that he had not long to wait before the sun would rise, and the enchanter of the Black Backlands would come to him and give him the 3rd and most difficult of the 3 tasks. And he thought that Fidelma was surely shut away from him, and that she would not be able to help him that day. At the rising of the sun, the enchanter of the Black Backlands came to where the King of Ireland's son was huddled and said, "I am now going to set you the 3rd and last task. Rise up now and come with me." The king's son came out of the water tank and followed the enchanter. They went to where there was a well. The king's son looked down, and he could not see the bottom, so deep the well was. "At the bottom," said the enchanter, "is the ring of youth. You must get it and bring it to me, or else you must lose your head at the setting of the sun." That was all he said. He turned then and went away. The king's son looked into the well, and he saw no way of getting down its deep, smooth sides. He walked back toward the castle. On his way he met Fidelma, and she looked at him with a deep dread in her eyes. "What task did my father set you today?" said she. "He bids me go down into a well," said the king's son. "A well?" said Fidelma, and she became all dread. "I have to take the ring of youth from the bottom and bring it to him," said the king's son. "Oh," said Fidelma, "he has set you the task I dreaded." Then she said, "You will lose your life if the ring of youth is not taken out of the well, and if you lose yours I shall lose my life too. There is one way to get down the sides of the well. You must kill me. Take my bones and make them as steps when you go down the sides. Then, when you have taken the ring of youth out of the water, put my bones as they were before, and put the ring above my heart. I shall be alive again. But you must be careful that you leave every bone as it was." The king's son fell into a deeper dread than Fidelma when he heard what she said. "This can never be," he said. "It must be," said she, "and by all your vows and promises I command that you do it. Kill me now, and do as I have bidden you. If it be done, I shall live. If it be not done, you will lose your life, and I will never regain mine." He killed her. He took the bones as she had bidden him, and he made steps down the sides of the well. He searched at the bottom, and he found the ring of youth. He brought the bones together again. Down on his knees he went, and his heart did not beat, nor did his breath come or go, until he had fixed them in their places. Over the heart he placed the ring. Life came back to Fidelma. "You have done well," she said. "Only one thing is not in its place, the joint in my little finger." She held up her hand, and he saw that her little finger was bent. "I have helped you in everything," said Fidelma, "and in the last task I could not have helped you if you had not been true to me when Eva and Gilvine brought you to them. Now the 3 tasks are done, and you can ask my father for one of his daughters in marriage. When you bring him the ring of youth, he will ask you to make a choice. I pray that the one chosen will be myself." "None other will I have but you, Fidelma, love of my heart," said the King of Ireland's son. The King of Ireland's son went into the house before the setting of the sun. The enchanter of the Black Backlands was seated on his chair of gold. "Have you brought me the ring of youth?" he asked. "I have brought it," said the king's son. "Give it to me then," said the enchanter. "I will not," said the king's son, "until you give what you promised me at the end of my tasks, one of your 3 daughters for my wife." The enchanter brought him to a closed door. "My 3 daughters are within that room," he said. "Put your hand through the hole in the door, and the one whose hand you hold when I open it, it is she you will have to marry." Then wasn't the mind of the king's son greatly troubled? If he held the hand of Eva or Gilvine, he would lose his love Fidelma. He stood without putting out his hand. "Put your hand through the hole of the door, or go away from my house altogether," said the enchanter from the Black Backlands. The King of Ireland's son ventured to put his hand through the hole in the door. The hands of the maidens inside were all held in a bunch. But no sooner did he touch them than he found that one had a broken finger. This he knew was Fidelma's hand, and this was the hand he held. "You may open the door now," he said to the enchanter. He opened the door, and the King of Ireland's son drew Fidelma to him. "This is the maiden I choose," said he, "and now give her her dowry." "The dowry that should go with me," said Fidelma, "is the slight red steed." "What dowry do you want with her, young man?" said the enchanter. "No other dowry but the slight red steed." "Go round to the stable then and get it, and I hope no well-trained wizard like you will come this way again." "No well-trained wizard am I, but the King of Ireland's son, and I have found your dwelling-place within a year and a day, and now I pluck the 3 hairs out of your beard, enchanter of the Black Backlands." The beard of the enchanter bristled like spikes on a hedgehog, and the balls of his eyes stuck out of his head. The king's son plucked the 3 hairs of his beard before he could lift a hand or say a word. "Mount the slight red steed and be off, the 2 of you," said the enchanter. The King of Ireland's son and Fidelma mounted the slight red steed and rode off, and the enchanter of the Black Backlands and his 2 daughters, Eva and Gilvine, in a rage, watched them ride away. And if you would like to know more about the adventures of the King of Ireland's son and Fidelma, look for the King of Ireland's son. And I hope you enjoyed this story, and join us again next Friday for Teen Story Share. Have a good weekend. Bye!